welcome to an emergency episode of the Bootleg Universe video cast on YouTube. We are talking about Rian Johnson's Glass Onion. We needed to get an episode out about this movie before the holidays because we've watched it and we have a theory about it that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about, frankly.
Yeah.
And it's a theory that Ken brought to me when we were hanging out a couple weeks ago after we had seen it in theaters. Because if you can see a movie in theaters, you should see it in theaters. Is that right?
Yeah.
We both saw it, and he had an interpretation of this movie that I thought was just absolutely brilliant. And then we just started snowballing and spiraling about what this movie was. And now that it's available on Netflix for everybody to watch, I want to share it with the world, and I haven't seen anybody else with this interpretation. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. This is what this movie is. Am I wrong?
No, I think spiraling. I love that. You know how it is when you are excited about a movie and you hear or you develop a theory about it. It just starts to snowball, and you start to peel back the layers.
And then suddenly everything about this movie just is that interpretation.
Yes. And I think we both enjoyed the movie quite a bit. Yes. I found it to be probably one of the most entertaining kind of theatrical experiences that I've had this year. And performances were great. Everything was really, really enjoyable. So we encourage people to watch the film. And of course, we are going to spoil it considerably.
Yes. Do not listen to the rest of this episode if you want to watch Glass Onion, because you should go into it knowing nothing. That's the best way to experience this movie. We highly encourage you to watch the movie, then listen to us talk about it.
Yes. So, and we're giving this is a perspective that we have, and this is our own, we'll say, interpretation.
We think it's the correct interpretation.
I think we think it has merit. So
Rian Johnson may deny it if he ever hears it, but we think this is what this movie is about.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing about artists is they are. I'll say this: he strikes me, and probably strikes both of us, as a writer director who is very much has a perspective about what he's doing. I think that's one of the reasons he's successful, and is just because he very much is approaching something with a thought process behind it, and he's making choices, and there's an intentionality about what's going on. So you could watch the film on a level where you're like, this is very entertaining, I'm enjoying it, this is wonderful and cool and everything like that. But like the title suggests, this is a glass onion, and there are layers behind that are in some ways fairly obvious, and I think probably intentionally, that it's both layered, but also it's right in front of you at the same time.
And so, Ken, your theory about this movie started because I think you, like a lot of people who are watching this movie, had a very specific reaction to the ending. And again, spoiler. At the end of this movie, Janelle Monáe and Edward Norton together destroy the Mona Lisa, the literal Mona Lisa, one of the greatest artistic masterworks of all time, is destroyed at the end of this movie. And you thought to yourself, why is Rian Johnson, of all people, thinking about the destruction of a masterpiece, right?
Yes. And because I think that when, we both know this is directors, that there's definitely, when you do something like that, I think that an audience member could watch it and be like, wow, that's really entertaining. And they made this, it's this crazy scene at the end. She destroys the Mona Lisa. And this is the central character essentially doing it. This is the protagonist mainly doing this. So there's a very pointed kind of idea behind this. And so, but as a writer director, when you look at that, you're like, there's definitely something being said here. This wasn't just a painting. This wasn't just, even a fictional work of art within the movie that they create. This is, in our world, the most important, probably the most important and most famous piece of artwork ever created. So
I think it's inarguable that the Mona Lisa is the most famous work of art ever made.
Yes, exactly. So to just kind of jump to the idea behind this, and then kind of maybe work backwards a little bit into it. I very much felt as though there was a statement being made about the
cultural reception to recent iterations of another important work of art.
Yes. I think what would you say is probably one of the most important cultural works of art?
Star Wars, I would say Star Wars is the most important movie culturally ever made. We can argue about what's the greatest movie ever made, what's the most important movie artistically ever made. Star Wars is probably the most important movie culturally ever made. It is as famous and as important in our time as the Mona Lisa.
Yes. So it was hard not, and obviously, Rian Johnson directed The Last Jedi, and, I don't think that it's out of place to say that there's a controversial reaction to that film, and also, Star Wars.
I think people either love or hate The Last Jedi.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people have tried to decipher what he was trying to do, with Star Wars, etc. And I think it's been debated so much. And we're not really here to wade into that so much as just almost like an observational perspective.
I think Ken and I, at some point in the future, will do an episode where we talk about The Last Jedi, the two of us.
Right.
But that is a separate 3, 4, 5 hour long conversation.
Right. So I think to kind of just jump into it, I looked at it as the hero character of this film intentionally destroys the most famous work of art in history to thwart what I think would be on the surface level interpreted as a corporate structure or corporate ownership. So Edward Norton's character in the film is this powerful, we'll say, tech magnate. Like he's a very powerful, wealthy man, and he sends out a message to a number of people that he knows, friends, to come to this island where they will solve his murder. And hijinks ensue, and things go in different directions, et cetera, et cetera. But if you look at the central characters, each one symbolizes something. And I think that upon further reflection, there's more than one interpretation. But one interpretation, you have a scientist, you have a governor, you have a social media star, and you have essentially an entertainment, fashion and entertainment icon. And so this wealthy, we'll say, corporate guy is ultimately kind of controlling, these various aspects of things. And I think that would probably be on some level the surface interpretation that you could make on this film.
So can I just interject?
Yeah, absolutely.
The immediate social media interpretation of Edward Norton's character, who's the rich guy who summons everybody that you're talking about, was that he was Elon Musk.
Yes.
And there is this superficial similarity. He's building rockets. It feels like Rian Johnson is borrowing from the real life elements of Elon Musk for this character, but is not actually making the character Elon Musk. He's just borrowing superficially for that purpose.
Exactly. So, but I was watching the movie, and I'm watching this. I'm sitting in the theater, and I'm watching it with two minds at the same time. I'm entertained. I'm enjoying the film as I'm going along. And then there's also a part of me that just the gears are just like turning and trying to go like, okay, what exactly is this? Because like I said, he's a filmmaker who has a perspective. At the very end of the film, the main Edward Norton's character has essentially just like almost kind of, because he's rich and because it's like kind of cool, and the Louvre needed money, he has borrowed the Mona Lisa from them for his own personal entertainment and enjoyment. And he keeps it inside this glass case that is very active by anything that happens in the room. The second something happens, the temperature changes, there's a loud noise, something like that, this glass sheet comes down and protects the Mona Lisa.
And protects the most important cultural artifact that we have.
Yes, exactly. And so Janelle Monáe brilliantly, like, really steals the show, and she's fantastic in this. And she plays there's a dual role of these twin sisters. And Edward Norton's character had essentially thwarted or undermined her sister, which led to pretty big problems. And so she is kind of there posing as the sister to get vengeance for what happened to her twin. And so she manages to kind of corner Edward Norton, but he manages to kind of upend the situation as well. Once he's managed to kind of like not exonerate himself, but there's nothing that they can hold over him. She suddenly starts destroying the room and going around and tipping over these very, very valuable kind of crystals that he has, and everyone's watching, and she's kind of very much defiantly doing it. And it gets to the point where almost everything's been destroyed in the room. She does this whole thing and kind of blows up the room. And eventually the only thing that's still left is the Mona Lisa. And there's this really like great, beautifully shot slow motion
and anybody who has watched the movie knows what we're talking about now. But I want to jump ahead slightly to say that, she purposefully destroys the Mona Lisa.
Right.
And she does so because throughout the movie, Edward Norton's character has said, I want to do something that is mentioned in the same breath as the Mona Lisa.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so
now,
here we go.
So if we're just taking it if we're starting from the point of Rian Johnson is making a movie where a character destroys the most important cultural artifact of all time, and people have accused Rian Johnson of destroying, whether we agree or not, people have accused him of destroying one of the most important film cultural franchises of all time, then
it's not a leap to say that there's a connection between these two concepts.
I would think so. Think so.
The hero of the story is destroying the most important cultural landmark in history. And like you just said, Rian Johnson has, based on people's opinions, some people feel that he did something akin to that with The Last Jedi. Again, very much open to people's interpretations. But it was really mind-boggling. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is the story of somebody who upends, we'll say, for lack of a better term, kind of a corporate ownership of a great work of art, and is like, I would rather see this destroyed where it is than watch it be continually abused by someone who's ultimately not going to be respecting it and is ultimately using it for their own vanity.
But here's the important point, and here's why we're making this video, right?
Yeah.
Janelle Monáe is not alone in her destruction of the Mona Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
In her destruction of the Mona Lisa, Edward Norton's character is also implicated, and he is forever going to be mentioned in the same breath as the destruction of this important work of art.
Yes.
Now, if we're saying that the Mona Lisa is the analog for Star Wars in this movie, and Janelle Monáe, who's a sympathetic character, is partially responsible for destroying it, and Edward Norton, who is not a sympathetic character, is partially responsible for destroying it, who is Edward Norton supposed to be?
Yes, so this leads us to the next thing. I presented this to Sam, and I was like, he's this, very successful corporate ownership, whatever you would want to say, big tech, I don't know. And Sam suddenly, just like puzzle pieces falling into place, I think landed on another level, another layer to the glass onion.
Edward Norton is J.J. Abrams. Edward Norton is J.J. Abrams. And once I click that together, I can't see any other interpretation of this movie. And let's go through all the logic of it. I mean, we talked about the Mona Lisa, the destruction of an important work of art, and the idea that this person is forever going to be associated with the destruction of something important and classic. And however you feel about The Rise of Skywalker, I think reactions were not positive. Right? I think that's fair to say. Yes. Without expressing our own opinions about it, reactions were negative toward The Rise of Skywalker. But once you decide that this movie, Glass Onion, is about the destruction of a work of art, or the reaction of people to the destruction of a work of art, then you go back and you realize, how does it start? How does this movie open?
And how does it open, Sam?
Does this movie open with a 10-minute sequence about mystery boxes? What was J.J. Abrams' TED Talk? What is J.J. Abrams known for? Mystery boxes.
Yes.
Presenting the audience with an enclosed story device that you have to solve, that you have to figure out how to open. Like that is the phrase that is associated with J.J. Abrams. Mystery box. And this movie opens with mystery boxes. I don't think that's accidental.
It's not accidental.
I think Rian Johnson is a smart filmmaker. He's not doing that by accident. He is making a point when he does that.
Yes. The characters all receive a box, and there's essentially a mystery that they have to be solving. Now, Sam said this, and I was like, wow, that is like another level. Another layer of this glass onion has been peeled away. And so we've only seen the movie. Sam's only seen the movie once. I've only seen it once, and then just scrubbed through it on Netflix to kind of just, get some things going. And this is where you cue the Charlie Day meme of him like pointing at the things on the K. But hear us out on this, okay?
Pepe Sylvia. Pepe Sylvia.
Exactly. Okay. So here's the thing. When Sam said this, I rewatched, and it's like, oh my goodness. Okay. So when they get the box initially, there's a few, like, I would say rudimentary puzzles that they have to solve. One is they have to look at the puzzle that you stare at with your eyes crossed, and then all of a sudden it reveals where the button is. The next one is this kind of, there's a few little levels of these puzzles, and I think at one point one of them is there's a music box, and they're listening to the song, and Kate Hudson's character is trying to Shazam it, and they're listening to this song, and a man comes up. I think, is it Yo-Yo Ma?
Yes, it's Yo-Yo Ma.
Yo-Yo Ma. Yeah. So Yo-Yo Ma comes up, and he leans into the camera and he says, "Hey, this is Bach's little fugue. Fugue or fugue, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Fugue in G minor." And then she says, "You sure?" And he says, "Yeah." So a fugue is a beautiful musical puzzle based on just one tune. And when you lay this tune on top of itself, it starts to change and turns into a beautiful new structure. So in other words, it's kind of just the same thing, just put on top of itself, and then supposedly kind of supposed to turn into the same thing. So this is where it gets interesting and definitely supports the theory. Suddenly there's a central button, and they press the central button and it lifts up. And what does it appear to be? A film reel. It's 100% a circular film reel, and just look at it. If you've worked around film, you recognize it. I worked as a projectionist in a movie theater when I was a teenager, and it's very much a film reel. They open the film reel. Inside the film reel, there is they have to figure out the number, and it's the atomic number for silver, which is 47. And film uses a silver coating in order to operate and function. And it projects an image, and then they figure out that it's the silver, and then they flip a switch. And if you've seen one of those switches, it's an old school switch. It's exactly the type of switch you would have on a projector. So not only is the mystery box a mystery box, it's an actual film projector. It's the mechanics of a film projector. So
Rian Johnson is saying we're opening this movie with mystery box as film projector. And
yes.
What is the value of this thing? And what does our most sympathetic character do when she sees this mystery box as movie projector?
Right, because what is at the center of the mystery box? It opens up and reveals the glass onion. When you open the glass onion, inside, it's just an invitation to the next thing. There isn't necessarily, the mystery itself is not solved. It's just kind of like, okay, now on to the next thing. And Janelle Monáe's character, rather than dealing with the protagonist, rather than dealing with the mystery box and engaging with it, takes a sledgehammer and smashes it to pieces.
The most sympathetic character in this movie
receives
a mystery box and smashes it with a hammer.
Yes.
Because she feels like that's the better way forward. Now, yes. Rian Johnson inherited a mystery box plot from the master of the modern mystery box, who talks about the mystery box and then narratively smash it with a hammer.
Yes.
Luke Skywalker throws the lightsaber over his shoulder. Rey isn't anybody, at least in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And she's nobody.
Right.
The mystery box is smashed.
Yeah.
And I can't help but feel like Rian Johnson is making a deliberate point about that mystery box version of storytelling. And yes. Then as we move forward through this movie, so much of it is Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc experiencing the mystery that's been like planned for them, mm-hmm. and then dealing with the mystery that evolves past that. And what does he say about Edward Norton? What is his feeling about Edward Norton? I understand it now. You're a moron.
Yes, and so there's a part where Dave Bautista's character is allergic to pineapple juice, and so he's killed by drinking pineapple juice. It's revealed at the end, and when they reveal it, Kate Hudson's character's like, he goes, Daniel Craig realizes that he just poisoned him by putting pineapple juice in there, and he goes, he put pineapple juice in his whiskey. It's so dumb. And then Kate Hudson's character says, it's so dumb, it's brilliant. And Daniel Craig says, no, it's just dumb.
But Yeah, right. The thing is, Benoit Blanc as this director surrogate, this filmmaker surrogate, is not just figuring out what Edward Norton is doing as the villain of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
When he figures out what Edward Norton is doing, he is explicitly saying, "You are bad at telling stories."
Right. Right. And then there's another part in the film when he's figuring out that Edward Norton was the shooter. He says it's like putting a loaded gun and turning off the lights. And then he goes, "Oh, you dim-witted, brainless, blah blah blah. You used my idea. You stole the idea on how to do this from me." And so he's accusing Edward Norton of being absolutely not even having an idea in his own mind. He's literally going that far.
He's saying that Edward Norton got his mystery plot. He got his mystery box from his mystery box maker. He got the plot of the murder mystery on this island from Gillian Flynn is the joke.
Mm-hmm.
And then he got the new elements after the mystery plot failed from Benoit Blanc. He says that everything is stolen because, as much as I love things that J.J. Abrams has done, one of the criticisms of J.J. Abrams would be that his successful stuff is using plots and elements that have worked before. It's borrowing from other people. The main criticism of The Force Awakens would be we're following the plot of the original Star Wars, and then the Starkiller base is the Death Star all over again. We're just repeating the beats.
Exactly. So, and I think that this kind of brings up another angle on Rian Johnson as a filmmaker. I think thematically, since probably Looper, and I've seen Brick many times. I haven't seen it in a few years. I've seen The Brothers Bloom, but definitely since Looper, there's been a running theme in Rian Johnson's work, and particularly the scene at the end of Looper, in which Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character is seeing that it's this great sequence, slow motion, and he's realizing as Bruce Willis is about to kill the Rainmaker and all this type of stuff, that the only way to stop this, and he says that there's a circular path that's happening right here, and the only way to stop it is to kill the past, to destroy the thing that is in many ways what we've perceived as the most valuable thing within this story, which probably would be your main character in the movie Looper, but everything. And he turns the gun on himself and he shoots himself. In The Last Jedi, obviously one of the most famous lines is Kylo Ren saying to Rey, destroy the past, kill it if you have to. There's a continued theme going on here. And I think that to see the hero intervene and destroy a great work of art that they feel is being misappropriated by somebody else, to them, they are essentially the hero. They're making the tough decision in this circumstance rather than continue to just stand by. And there's another line in Glass Onion, and I can't remember it, but basically like you would rather lie to support a lie than tell the truth or something like that. It's the same kind of idea and concept that rather than watching this thing continue to be taken in a weird direction, or you're better off just destroying it than seeing it continually be abused. And it's hard not to think when you kind of put these things together to see that there is ultimately another narrative layer happening in the Glass Onion.
You're right. And I think that, the crime at the center of the Glass Onion that we don't know until later on in the story, the crime at the center of the Glass Onion is one of Janelle Monáe's characters has provided Edward Norton's character with everything he needs to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And then she feels like he has wasted and destroyed what she's provided him to be successful because he wants to go off in this other direction with this energy source that will blow up the world, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's hard not to interpret that as Rian Johnson has provided J.J. Abrams everything he needs to be successful, and then he watches J.J. Abrams just go off in a direction that's gonna blow up everything, rather than follow the successful lead that they've already built.
Yes. And so it takes that fuel source and throws it into the fire, and kind of mass destruction at the end. So yeah, dude.
Yeah, and I want to say, my assumption is, and I have no basis in this other than our interpretation of this movie, but I think Rian Johnson came up with the concept of the glass onion, this thing that appears to have layers but is ultimately see-through and hollow, to describe J.J. Abrams' storytelling and to describe the storytelling of Rise of Skywalker. And then he reverse engineered an entire movie to justify the title Glass Onion, because it is kind of the perfect, if you are being uncharitable and taking this interpretation of J.J. Abrams, which again, we're just trying to interpret this movie. We're not passing judgment on either of these filmmakers. If you are taking this uncharitable interpretation of J.J. Abrams, then Glass Onion, this thing that seems like it has layers but is ultimately completely transparent, would be the perfect metaphor for everything that people complain about with J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, and I, like you said, this is just our third-party observation on this whole thing, because there's work from both of these filmmakers that I love, and so
we can go down the list. I mean, Mission Impossible 3, Star Trek, Force Awakens. These are great movies, you know.
Yeah, and so we're not passing any judgment or anything like that. It's just too interesting to look at and not discuss or open a conversation. And I think the other thing too is, you know, there's definitely a maybe an unwritten rule to some degree in the entertainment business, particularly amongst directors, to not really, you know, talk unkindly about other filmmakers' work.
We're trying not to do it now.
Right, exactly. We're because anybody who has worked in this knows how incredibly challenging even making anything is. Just to record this required immense levels of production, let alone trying to make a massive film.
We failed. We had to restart this recording 3 times before it worked.
So it's just one of those things that, you know, I think though that if somebody wants to express themselves, you know, you put it in your work and you write about it, and maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not, maybe it just is almost there's an osmosis that happens, that it just kind of starts to come out. There's a subconscious element to writing. So we're not sure, obviously. We're just from a very intriguing observation watching this.
But I think the 2 most important pieces here, right, are number 1, the movie starts with a sequence about mystery boxes. That's undeniable. I don't know how else to deal with that.
Yes.
Number 2, the weirdest creative choice that Rian Johnson makes in this movie, a choice that I know has already alienated people, is they destroy the Mona Lisa. And why would you make a movie about destroying a great work of art unless you were trying to come to terms with the way people have interpreted what has already happened with another great work of art, another equally important piece of our culture.
Right. And so one could look at, the decisions, however they want to interpret it. They could look at the decisions of the main character being willing to do that as making the very, very hard choice of seeing a great work of art like that. They would rather see it in a weird way preserved by being destroyed in its current state than continually being used and, we'll say, abused by people till the end of time. And so,
but maybe that's an interpretation that only comes after that work of art has been used in ways that well, our criticisms are for another episode.
Yeah. So, and I think, what, I'll say this, in the whether you want to include this or not, I think I really love symbolism. I really love peeling back layers in movies. Sam knows that this isn't the only film that I've offered interpretation on in some ways. And part of that's just kind of trying to look a little bit, and I'm not singular to me by any means or anything like that. I just am a person who enjoys going, wow, like I think that there's something being said here. And so this probably won't be the last, we'll say, interpretive knives out mystery that we are uncovering here, as a joint Benoit Blanc.
And if you have any other points that you think help this theory, please post them in the comments. As always, watch the rest of our Bootleg Universe videos and watch The Guardians of Justice on Netflix. Thank you for watching our interpretation of Knives Out.